if you are letting those two guys go, Chris Carbert and Tony Olenek, the two remaining, how strong is your case against them? I think this is, in the one hand, a win is a win. But this is not the win that was promised. This is not the subject of the splashy RCMP press conference with all the firearms laid out. Look what we seized. It was a whole militia. Now you got one guy who shouldn't have had a gun where he had it, another guy who was planning to bring a gun. That's all you got? Where's the conspiracy to commit murder? Yeah, look at this imagery here. This is police had this press conference. Now, if you take away the scary color of the khaki and the black guns, those are just basically, I would imagine that most homes in the country in southern Alberta have these weapons on hand. Now, maybe this is more than average, but this is not. There's no shocking weapons in here. There's no fully automatic weapons. This photo that the RCMP published, and it was staged in front of the police vehicle. This is a PR shot. This is to scare Toronto Liberals and to say this is why we're bringing in the Emergencies Act. Because after all that, okay, one guy had a loaded gun where he shouldn't, and another guy was going to bring a gun to where he shouldn't. That's all they got left. Let me keep reading. I'm not sure where I left off there. Mr. Morin, that's Jerry, the guy who was convicted of trafficking. Mr. Morin has steadfastly maintained from the very beginning that he played no part of any alleged conspiracy to murder police officers and is relieved and grateful that those charges and associated allegations have been withdrawn by the Crown. Dunn wrote, that's his lawyer. Moreover, the charge that Mr. Morin pled guilty to does not suggest that Mr. Morin at any time took firearms into Coutts, only that he agreed to. It's unfortunate Mr. Morin has spent 2 years of his life in custody awaiting this day. Well, that's for sure. And why did it take 2 years for this plea deal? I mean, there's been no new facts on the ground. Nothing new has happened. All the facts have been frozen in time for 2 years. Who buckled? Was this offer always put to Jerry Morin and he finally took it? Or was this offer always available to the prosecutors who finally took it? I would imagine that the prosecutors have always been in the driver's seat here. They had more money, they had more resources, more lawyers, more support. I would imagine that this was a change in strategy by the Crown prosecutors and the police, not by Jerry Morin. Why would they have made this change? Well, either they thought this conviction was somehow useful to convicting the two others, and I don't know how it could be, or they thought we better get something out of these two guys. I'm very curious what will happen to the two who are in custody because from my assessment, they're the more palatable or the less aggressive of the suspects. I'll keep reading. Song also issued a brief statement via email, and that's the lawyer for Chris Lysak, the so-called head of security for Diagolon. To be clear, Mr. Lysak did not admit to possessing his handgun for a dangerous purpose. He did not attend the Coutts protests with the intent to harm anyone. He admits that his firearm was loaded with ammunition at the time of police seizure, but denies having loaded and chambered the gun. Song said, the blockade crippled the international crossing for more than 2 weeks as truckers and others blocked the highway, yada, yada. So that's the report in Post Media by Kevin Martin. And what I like about that report is it actually relies on statements directly from the lawyers. And it gives the side of the story of the two accused who are now technically convicted. The first thing I've got to say is they have spent too long in prison for those minor charges. In fact, I put it to you that if someone were charged from scratch today with those offenses and those were the only offenses that were heard, I do not believe either of them would have had a custodial sentence at all. That is not 1 day in prison. They probably would have had a firearms prohibition for a period of time, 5 or 10 years. They maybe have some sort of suspended sentence, but they wouldn't have done any jail time, let alone 2 years of hard time. So something's wrong here, obviously. And of course, like I say, there are 4 people on trial. 2 of them just pled out, but the 2 that I would have thought the Crown had the better case against. What happens to the other 2? On the one hand, I can imagine there's an enormous temptation to take a deal, just to get out, just to save themselves. I think their trial's scheduled for June. In fact, I think that's how the piece in Post Media ends. So we're in February, March, April, May, June. That's still 90 days. And there's no way this trial is going to be quick. I mean, we've watched Tamara Leach, and her trial extends to almost a year. The process is the punishment. So the temptation from the remaining two suspects, Chris Carbert and Tony Olenek, just to take a deal and get out must be huge. But maybe they think, look, I've waited 700 plus days already. I'll wait another 90 days. I'll have my trial and I'll win and I'll be exonerated. Now, I say the phrase again, the process is the punishment. What kind of a win is that? If 2.5 years of your life were consumed by this and countless amounts of money. Tony Olenek, one of the four defendants, purportedly issued a statement that said he spent $550,000 on lawyers. Now, first of all, I got to say, I don't know how that's possible at all. That's such a staggeringly large sum. I don't know if that can be true or how that's even possible. Like I say, Rebel News crowdfunded the lawyers for the men in the first instance when they had their bail appearance. Now they fired our lawyers because I think they were disappointed they didn't get bail. Their next lawyers tried and didn't get them as well. I think one of the reasons these men have been in prison so long is they've gone through, I think, 4 sets of lawyers, including some of the best lawyers in Alberta. And I don't know why that is. That may be a reason that the legal bills are so high. And it also may be a reason why the case is delayed. For a large, complicated case like this, where there's an enormous amount of evidence by, I think there were 14 police officers who had statements that they swore to, just reading all the material and listening to all the wiretaps and watching all the drone videos or whatever the form of the evidence would take a long time if you've replaced your lawyers 4 times. But still, it's an astonishingly long period of time, and it lends credence to the accusation that these were political prosecutions.